seems distant and the journey seems long. Gabriel Brownlow Dindy.
Will you wait on the Lord? That is a great question, and that is a question we will answer tonight. I'm greatly honored to be able to come down here and be able to speak to y'all. I don't get this opportunity much, but it's what I love to do. My first ever preaching gig was in Paintsville, Kentucky. I don't know if you know. I know Johnny LeMaster has been here multiple times, and he gave me my first preaching gig. And the funny thing about that, my dad is here right now. I got invited to go preach there, but then they told me, it's like, you think you can get your dad to preach on it? And I was like, yeah, I can. And then I told my dad right after that, I was like, they invited me first, so this time you'll be coming with me, and I won't be coming with you because I've been traveling with him my whole entire life. I also want to thank both Terrys for the hospitality they have given me. They picked me up yesterday and gave me a wonderful meal. We went out and seen a little bit of Stewart, and I was greatly honored. They gave me a meal today that put me straight to sleep. And it kind of eased my nerves because I am a little new at this, but this is what I love doing, like I said. We'll get into the lesson. Oftentimes we tend to ask God why. Why haven't you given me this? Why haven't you answered my prayer? A preacher once said, if you want God to do the super, you have to do the natural. I'll say it again. If you want God to do the super, you have to do the natural. We ask for everything, but are we willing to do His will? We sometimes forget that He is all-knowing, He is all-powerful, and He is able to answer any prayer and request He sees fit. God's timing is different than ours. Today, I'll be preaching to myself because with the stuff that I have learned and I have had to study over the period of studying for this lesson, it really hit home for me because I've been through a lot of struggles in my whole career, football career in general. I'll start off by telling y'all a story. I'll try to make it as short as possible. But it all started in high school. And I tell these stories not to boast of myself, because when I do sermons like this, I tell my parents, I'm like, I don't like talking about myself. I just don't like talking, but it's necessary to make the point. So I'll tell you some of my accolades, and I'll tell you the ups and downs of what has happened throughout my career. It all started off in high school. Well, I'll go back to before high school when I was in Louisiana. I didn't know anything about this recruiting thing. I was in a little small town. Many people didn't go to this Division I thing. And then I got to Florida for my dad's preaching job. I got there, we were zoned for this school that apparently was number 7 in the nation at the time. I went there not knowing how this whole D1 thing worked. When I first got there, before I even got to high school, the high school coach came up to me, he was like, man, what position do you play? And I was like, running back at the time, because I wasn't this big. So I was playing running back, and he was like, yeah, I would love for you to be on my team. And so I didn't think anything of it because I had some bad experiences before then with football, and I was like, man, should I still play this? I was a lot of questioning myself. And I continued to go, and I went to tryouts, and it was kind of hard. It was difficult. It was a whole new thing. Going from little league to high school, there's a lot more schemes and stuff like that, and it was kind of hard for me. And I went to the spring game, and all these recruits were there. There was Oklahoma, there was Tennessee, there was Kentucky, there was Miami, there was Florida. I don't know if Arkansas was there. I'm glad they weren't there. But, it kind of put some nerve on me. I was a freshman. I was 14 years old. I went out there. I sold it. I didn't play to the best of my ability. I kept that. It messed up my brain for a little bit. I was like, man, I really just ruined this opportunity. And then I thought to myself, I couldn't sit here and just let that happen. So I really dedicated myself to be able to play to the best of my ability. And so later on that year, I went to camps. I did things like that. And I started getting some offers. I remember the first time I ever got an offer, it was after a summer practice. And I called my parents. I was like, yeah, I just got this offer from Miami. I was like, what does it mean? Because I didn't really know what it meant. And they were like, is it a full ride? And I was like, yes, sir. And he was like, they were so excited. I was like, so, like, what's happening? Like, I was just confused about it. And so we'll start fast forwarding a little bit. You know, I get to my sophomore year, and I'm doing pretty good. And something happened. I started feeling sick just for a couple weeks, and I couldn't eat. I couldn't drink, I couldn't sleep. That was the worst part. And all of a sudden, you know, I started feeling good that week on a Thursday, and we usually play on Friday in the high school. And I started feeling a little better. I was like, Mom, Dad, can you let me play? Like, you know, I've been sick this whole entire week, and I was like, can I play? And they let me play. When I'm telling the story, they are not bad people at all. Listen, I begged them so much. I played. And it turned out, you know, I had to get rushed to the hospital by halftime. I mean, I was in so much pain. I was feeling sick. I was throwing up. I got to the hospital, and I had a fever of over 104. And they were like, you know, if you go one more degree up, you know, that's when the seizures start happening and stuff like that. And so I was just thinking it's going to be a little checkup. And it turned out I had to be there overnight, and it turned out to be a whole week activity. I had MRSA. And when I had MRSA, you know, it made me realize all the blessings that God has given me. I looked at as I was in the hospital, I was like, this can be taken away like this. But I continued, and I got out of there in a week. I had to recover for a couple of weeks, and I continued to have a good season. The junior season, it was pretty plain, so I did pretty good the junior season. And my senior season, it all came to an end really quickly. I got third game in. I was going to make a tackle. I grabbed onto a person and ripped the tendon in my finger all the way down to my palm. And it hurt. It hurt. And then I also pulled my hamstring in the same place. So it was a lot going on. And that put a halt to my senior year really fast. I recovered from that throughout my senior year, and I got invited to the Under Armour All-American game. I got to the Under Armour All-American game, got COVID. I got COVID for the rest of that week. And got out the day of the game. I played in that game. I wasn't supposed to play that much, but there were some people that got in trouble, and I had to play a lot more than I needed to. I got to that game. I did good. There was 2 minutes left in the fourth quarter. I'm going to make a tackle for loss. I bend down to make the tackle, and boom, my ACL is torn. Man, at that point, I pushed myself off the ground. In my brain, I was like, this can't be. This can't be. Even through all the pain and agony I was in, I pushed myself off the ground and made myself walk off the field. I was still in denial that my ACL was torn, but I knew there was something wrong. I felt it. I got to this recruiting process. I didn't know how it went, so I didn't know if they were going to take my scholarship or not. But apparently, if you're pretty good in high school, they'll wait for you. And so I got to college, got my ACL repaired. And I can tell you one thing: going through that ACL repair, it changed my perspective. I'd say I went through a little bit of depression going through that, doing the same thing over and over and over again. And some days you didn't see any progress, and it hurt. As we continue, we're going to skip to right now. I just got off of an ankle injury. I did just get off of an ankle injury. I just recovered from that. I had it at the end of the season, and I got to play in the season. It didn't stop me, but they were like, oh, it's a little bone chip. And it turns out when they started doing surgery, I tore my whole ligament in the inside of my ankle. I know you're like, how is this man a D1 athlete? But listen, there's a plan. There is a plan. Everyone in this room has had something in your life that you may have asked why or when. Maybe it's being short on money. Maybe it's a loved one that is sick. Maybe it's you struggling to find a mate. We all have been through some of these things. I'd like for you to turn to Genesis chapter 37, verses 5 through 11. Genesis chapter 37, verses 5 through 11. Just remember, we are on God's timing. We'll look at this example of Joseph. We've all heard of Joseph. We all remember as kids learning about the coats of many colors. That's the one thing that pops out in your brain, the coats of many colors. But we don't know why. Sometimes we don't remember why he got that coats of many colors. There's a little favoritism going on. And we can see as we read the 5 through 11, and it says, and Jacob dwelt in the land wherein, I'm reading verse 1. It says, and Joseph dreamed a dream, and he told it to his brethren, and they hated him yet more. And he said unto them, hear, I pray you, this dream which I have dreamed. For behold, we were being sheaves in the field, and lo, my sheaf arose, and also stood upright. And behold, your sheaves stood around about, and made obedience to my sheaf. We see here, Joseph, he has these dreams. He kind of rubs it in. You know, you can kind of see why the brothers were kind of a little jealous. He kind of rubs it in that he was, in these dreams that he was higher than them. He was greater than them, and they bowed down to him. If we keep going in verse 8, and it says, the brother said to him, shalt thou indeed reign over us? And shalt thou indeed have dominion over us? And thou hated him yet more for his dreams and for his words. And he dreamed yet another dream, and told his brethren, and said, behold, I have dreamed a dream more. And behold, the sun and the moon and the 11 stars made obedience to me. You see here, he's still going. You see that you see why the brothers are upset at this point. And if we go to verse 8, we see the brothers hating. The hate of the world will try and bring you down, like Joseph's brothers tried to do to him. If we continued and taught, it says in verse 10, and he told it to his father and his brethren, and his father rebuked him and said unto him, what is this dream that thou dream? Shall I and thy mother and thy brethren indeed come to bow down over thee to the earth? And his brothers envied him, but his father observed the sayings. We keep going, and it says, and we keep going in verse 14, it says, and he said to him, go, I pray to thee, see whether it be well with my brethren, and well with the flocks, and bring me a word again. So he sent him out. He sent him out to Val in Hebron, and he came to Shechem. And if we go down and see in verse 18, this is where it all happened. And when they saw him afar off, even before he came near unto them, they conspired against him to slay him. The world will conspire against you. 1 Corinthians chapter 2, verses 5 said, put your faith in the Lord, not in the world. Because if you put your faith in the world, they are on a rocky foundation. They will crumble at any time. But if you put your faith in the Lord, you will be on a firm foundation. Just like I am tonight, I'm on this firm foundation. In 1 Peter chapter 1, verses 18 to 21, it says that Christ died for us that we may have faith in him. We shall have faith in him. He died that we have something to hope for. Faith and hope. We fast forward to chapter 39. We read verses 1 through 6. We see after this, we'll back up a little bit. We see that when Joseph's brothers saw him, they planned to kill him. They planned to kill him, and one of the brothers told him, this is our brother, we cannot kill him. So they decided to sell him into slavery. You look at that, you see that Joseph got sold into slavery, you think that's a bad occasion. You look at this and you're like, man, Joseph's going through it. But if we read and we continue to go to chapter 39, it says, and Joseph was brought down to Egypt, and Potiphar, an officer of the Pharaoh, captain of the guard in Egypt, brought him with his hands of the Ishmaelites, brought him out of the hands of the Ishmaelites, which he had brought him down thither. And the Lord was with Joseph, and he was a prosperous man, and he was in the house of the master. We see here in verse 2 that he prospered. We are asking ourselves tonight, are we waiting on the Lord? Joseph could have cursed God like most people would do. Like, why is this happening to me? These are my own brother. Why are they betraying me? Joseph continued, and he saw that God was on his side in verse 2. He prospered in a land that he was foreign from. We continue, it says, and his master saw that the Lord was with him, and the Lord made all that he did to prosper in his hands. That's another example. You see here in verse 3, Joseph stood out. The Lord was with him. They saw that the Lord was with him. Like us today, we are alone, sometimes could be alone in a dark world, but our light can shine. Our light can shine. I'm in an environment where I'm the only Christian in there. And I see these people in the locker room, they're doing all these evil deeds, these evil acts. I sometimes may feel alone, but I have to let my light shine. I have to let it learn. I have to let my actions show and show the Lord that he is in me. And as we continue in verse 4, it says, and Joseph found grace in his sight, and he served him, and he made him overseer of his house and all that he put into his hands. Even through all the pain and betrayal of his brothers, he was sent to a pagan land still, but he still worshiped the Lord without wavering. We know that Egypt is a pagan land because if we fast forward a little bit in the Exodus, we all know the story of Moses. Moses had to battle with Pharaoh for a long time just to let God's people go. So we can see from there that Egypt is a pagan land. If we skip down to verse 7, it says, and it came to pass after these things that his master's wife cast her eyes upon Joseph. We'll come to our second sub point, not our second point. It says, he resisted. It is sometimes hard to see the light at the end of the tunnel when there is so much darkness around us. But we have to remain faithful, just like Joseph did in his time of temptation. In 1 John chapter 2, verses 15, it tells us to be in the world, but not of the world. If you listen to that, be in the world, but not of the world. We are in this world. We are using the resources. We are using all those things. But the people of the world are wicked. We need to be of the world. We need to be in the world, but not of the world. If we skip down to verses 9, it says, there is none greater in this house than I, neither have I kept back anything from me, but thee, because of thou art his wife. How then can I do this great wickedness and sin against thee? Joseph didn't forget the blessings of God in his time of temptation. We have, in our time of temptation, what do we think about? Do we just let the temptation go? Do we just let it take over? Or do we remember all the great blessings that God has given us throughout our lives? Just like Joseph, I had to remember that God has blessed me with so much. He has blessed me with the ability to be able to be a D1 athlete. So in this time of frustration, I can't forget, I can't blame God for what happened to me. God has blessed me with so much, and I cannot complain about any of it. With all these struggles in life, are you blaming him instead of remembering the blessings that he's given you? Joseph was falsely accused and put in prison, and he still remained faithful. So what is our excuse to not to remain faithful? You know, we have an example of that in today's time. You know, a couple years back, it took the world under its feet. COVID. People, when COVID happened, everybody scattered. Everybody acted like they didn't know what to do. But in the Word, out of all these times, we've seen the apostles being persecuted. We see that Joseph, you know, he getting put in prison, but he's still finding a way to worship. A lot of us just took that as an excuse to just go out and like, oh, yeah, they said we can't go out for a little bit, you know, we're not going to worship the Lord. But this man is put in prison, and he still let his light shine in that prison. Joseph had a lot of ups and downs in his life, but he still found a way to give God his praise and remain faithful. Joseph was on God's timing, and he believed in the plan that he had in him, waiting on the Lord. Joseph was the definition of waiting on the Lord. In chapter 50, we can skip all the way to chapter 50, go to 19 verses 20. I was reading it, I was like, man, this is powerful. Genesis chapter 50, verses 19 and 20. It says, "And Joseph said unto them, Fear not, for I am in the place of God. But as for you, you thought evil against me. But God meant it unto good to bring to pass as it is this day, to save me such people alive." You look at this and see the powerfulness. You see that his brothers wished evil upon him. They wanted to kill him. They wanted him to be out of their lives. They didn't know what was going to happen to Joseph. Anything could have happened to him. But he says right here, this is where God wanted me to be. This, I believe wholeheartedly, through all the pain, through all the injuries that I've had, this is where God wants me to be. I charge you to be like Joseph. We have another example in Genesis chapter 12. Genesis chapter 12, verses 1 and 4. We all know this one as well. We know Abraham. We'll look at chapter 12, verses 1 and 4 to give us a little just to see what happens in the story before. It says, "Now the Lord has said unto Abraham, Get thee out of thy country, and from the kindred, and from thy father's house, and unto the land that I will show thee. And I will make of thee a great nation, and I will bless thee, and make thee name great, and thou shalt be a blessing. And I will bless them that bless thee, and I will curse him that curseth thee. And in thee shall all families of the earth be blessed. So Abram departed as the Lord had spoken unto him, and Lot went with him, and Abram was 75 years old when he departed out of Haran." So what I want to see out of this verse is the age of Abraham. Now, if we keep going, we see that this age plays a big part. Our point for this one is that he was disobedient. Abraham has done so many great things. We've had nations go through Abraham, but at this point, he was disobedient. They didn't wait on God. In verses 4, it names the age of Abraham. At this age, it would be very difficult for him to have a child. In verse 7, it says, "Unto thy seed, his children, and so on, he will give them this land." We are on God's timing, so we don't have the right to rush his plan. We go to chapter 16, verses 1 and 2. It's now Sarai, Abram's wife, bare him no children, and she had a handmaid, an Egyptian, whose name was Hagar. And Sarah said unto Abram, "Behold, now the Lord hath restrained me from bearing. I have prayed thee, go into my maid. It may be that I may obtain children by her." And Abram hearkened to the voice of Sarah. These first two verses are trouble waiting to happen. You started in verse 2, you see Sarah trying to speak for the Lord. The Lord has made Abraham a promise, as we saw before, but Abram and Sarah didn't wait on the Lord and decided to take things into their own hand. When we start trying to take things into our own hands, that's when everything goes out of control. Abraham should have known it was a trap. I've been in a relationship for 2 years. And sometimes when your girlfriend or your wife says something, she's like, I'll give you an example. So my girlfriend was going on a little girls trip. It was about 4 hours away from their hometown. And I was like, yeah, I'm going to go on a boys trip with my boys. And I said, I'll probably go to somewhere like Hawaii or something like that, just playing around with her. And she was like, that's not the same. That's not the same. And she was like, and after a while, I kept teasing her. She was like, you can go. She give me that like, you can go, but you know what she really means. You don't go. You'll come back and you'll have a world of trouble. Sometimes you gotta read into it a little bit. As you see here, Sarah's telling Abraham to go. He's telling him to have a child with this lady, this foreigner from Egypt. We should have known that. We should have known that was going to be a problem since the very beginning. Sometimes we say stuff that may come back to bite us. In chapter 17, verses 1, it mentions that Abraham is 90 years old. We fast forward to verse 15 of chapter 17. God is making his promise to Abraham and Sarah that he will give them a son. Abraham still had doubt in his heart that God is all-powerful. He laughed when the Lord said he would have a son at his age. That's very bold. That's very bold to laugh at the Lord when he said that he would do something for you. In verses 18 and 21 through 21, God had a plan for Abraham, just like he has a plan for us. And we will get to that at the end of the lesson. Don't be like Abraham. Don't be like Sarah. Don't be disobedient. If we go over to another example in the Bible, we go to Daniel chapter 6. Daniel chapter 6. Now, when we look at Daniel, I feel like this is one of the greatest examples of waiting on the Lord. In 606 BC begins Babylonian's reign, and it ended in 536. That equals up to 70 years. So in this time, Daniel is waiting 70 years. We'll get to why that's so significant in just a minute when we start reading. In 606 BC begins the reign of Nebuchadnezzar. Now, if we go to verse 3, it says, "Then this Daniel was preferred above the presidents and the princes, because his excellent spirit was in him, and the king thought to set him over the whole realm." Daniel was in a powerful position. There was an excellent spirit in him. Oftentimes we get with our own peers, we get in a place of power, and we kind of forget the Lord. We kind of forget the blessings that he has given us. Daniel had an excellent spirit through all the things he's done. If we go to our first subpoint of that, be faultless. We have to be faultless. Now, if we go to verse 4, it says, "Then the presidents and the princes sought to find occasion against Daniel concerning the kingdom, but they could not find none occasion, nor fault. For as much as he was faithful, neither was there any error or fault found in him." I know you just read what I just read. He was faultless. They couldn't find anything out of all the 70 years that he's been there. Is that not amazing? He did not waver. He stuck with God. In verse 4, they wanted to find fault in him, but they couldn't. He continued to be faithful no matter what. Verse 6, "Then these presidents and princes assembled together to the king and said thus unto him, King Darius, live forever." They were trying to butter him up a little bit because they knew that they were about to do something wrong. You ever have those occasions where when I was younger, I used to ask my parents if I could stay the night at one of my friends' house. You'd be like, "Mom, you are looking so beautiful today," just to try to get her, to let me go even more, increase my chances. We kind of butter them up, that they know that they're about to do something wrong. If we skip down to verse 16, verse 16 says, "Then the king commanded and brought Daniel and cast him in." Okay, I'm sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself. So at this time, they go to the king, and they're basically saying, if anybody worship you in these I can't remember the time period, but he says, if anybody worships you, they shall be don't worship you, they shall be thrown in the den of lions. So they couldn't find anything on Daniel, so they had to go mess with his faith. They knew that he would not waver from God. They saw that there was no fault in him. So they tried to get around the way and go into the king and say, if anybody else worships any other god besides you, they shall be thrown into the den. Be fearless. Verse 16 we were about to read says, then the king commanded, and they brought Daniel and cast him into the den of lions. Now the king spake and said unto Daniel, thy God whom thou servest continually, he will deliver you. If we go down to verses 20 to 24, we'll read that in a minute. It says, Daniel was fearless for one reason, because he believed in the one and true God. He knew that God was with him. In Romans chapter 8, verse 31, we all know the verse, if God is with us, who can be against us? That verse is so powerful. And it represents Daniel so well, because he is thrown into a pit of lions with no fear, because he knew that one and true God would deliver him. If we read in verses 20 through 24, it says, and when he came to the den, he cried with a lamentable voice unto Daniel, and the king spake and said to Daniel, O Daniel, servant of the living God, is thy God whom thou servest continually able to deliver thee from the lions? Then said Daniel unto the king, O God, O king, live forever. My God hath sent his angel and have shut the mouth that they have not hurt me, for as much as before him innocence was found in me, and also before thee, O king, have I done no hurt. We see that the king, I forgot to mention, the king really thought highly of Daniel. When they came to the king, and was telling him that nobody else should worship any other god but you, they didn't know. The king didn't know at this time that they were speaking of Daniel, and Daniel alone. And we'll get to the rest of that part at the end of this. But then we can go to verse 25 to 28. Be faithful. Then King Darius wrote unto all the people and the nations and languages that dwell in all the earth, peace be multiplied unto you. I make a decree that in every dominion of my kingdom men tremble and fear before the God of Daniel. For he is the living God and steadfast forever, and his kingdom that which shall not be destroyed, and his dominion shall be ever unto the end. He delivered and rescued, and he worked signs and wonders in heaven and in earth, whose have delivered Daniel from the power of the lion. So this Daniel prospered and reigned of Darius and the reign of Cyrus of Persia. We see here that Daniel didn't waver. He didn't waver at all. Just like we shouldn't waver. You know, when we get peer pressure, with people at work, people at football, for me, anywhere you go, sometimes you like to change the way you act just to try to fit in. But you see here, Daniel didn't change anything. He didn't change anything at all. And you see what happened as the verses I just read. Daniel changed the whole nation, man. That is powerful. He changed a whole nation just because he did not waver from God. People are ready for something to happen, but God may not think they aren't ready yet. What does God expect from us when he wants us to wait? He wants us to be faultless like Daniel. He wants us to be fearless like Daniel. He wants us to be faithful. As we come to a close, what should we do when times get hard? We should wait on the Lord. We should be patient like Joseph. We should not be disobedient like Abraham and Sarah. You should be diligent in the Lord like Daniel was. If you didn't take anything from this lesson, take this. Daniel and Joseph are clear-cut examples of waiting on the Lord. If you find yourself being impatient and trying to move faster than the Lord, look at these examples tonight and apply them to your lives. If you have not yet obeyed the gospel, you have to follow these steps. You have to hear the word, Romans 10:17. You have to believe it, John 8, verses 24. You have to repent, Luke chapter 13, verses 3. You have to confess the Lord, Matthew chapter 10, verses 32 to 33. And you have to be baptized, Galatians chapter 3, verses 27. If you have not yet obeyed the gospel and you would like to tonight, please come